So to start, I want to just say hello and welcome. Thank you so much for being here for today's alumni and current participant panel addressing Indigenous perspectives. I'm really excited to be moderating this event and connecting with James and Crystal and Matt. And I want to thank you for being here. Before we jump into all of the questions and get to dive into your experiences with the program, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lupeniwak, and Changtun nations, on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. With this, we respect the longstanding relationships that Indigenous nations have to this land, as they are the original caretakers. We acknowledge historical and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples endure in Canada, and we accept responsibility as a public institution to contribute towards revealing and correcting miseducation, as well as renewing respectful relationships with Indigenous communities through our teaching, research, and community service. I want to go back to that first slide, and if you came across this event on LinkedIn or on the EMBA website and saw on the event page that this was the specific image used to connect with the panel, I want to mention that this is a new space being opened later this fall. It's scheduled for the first week of November on Western's main campus as an Indigenous learning space. Now, this will become a place for Indigenous initiatives and a space to advance Indigenous ways of teaching and learning. It's also intended to be a touchstone for Indigenous peoples and communities to connect with Western and for the larger Western and London community, and all people who share a common interest in advancing indigenization, decolonization, and reconciliation to foster a real sense of community and diversity. I know personally I'm very keen to come back to campus and see this for myself when it opens in November. There have been a number of delays to the construction because of COVID, but the plan is for the space to be revealed in November, and I think it will be a really important space on campus, and one that, as I said, I'm really personally excited to see for myself. So I hope that everyone will have a chance to come and see the space, engage with the space and the initiatives that will be taking place there. So with that being said, I want to dive into the experiences with the program and the impact of the program. First, I'll just say that the Executive MBA is a 15-month while you work program designed for mid to senior level professionals and is really intended to accelerate careers. And so I'm excited for you to hear from James and Crystal and Matt in terms of how the program has impacted approaches to leadership, approaches to life. The personal impact of the program is often quite profound. I think people come for professional advancement and walk away feeling like changed people personally as well. And I see Matt nodding. Matt, I don't want to steal your thunder, but I know you just finished the program in June. James, you'll be able to speak as someone who finished a little further out in 2020. And then Crystal, I'm really excited to hear your first impressions as a new participant in the program. Again, thank you for being here. And maybe I've just kind of given a little teaser of who you are, but if you don't mind, maybe I can pass it over. James, would you like to start? Can you tell us about yourself and introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Kim. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. So my name is James Arek. It's Ariak, but Arek in my language. I'm located in Iqaluit, Nunavut. So I graduated in October of 2020, along with Melissa. That's not part of the panel. And I work as a political advisor for the Premier of Nunavut. So that's my introduction. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you so much. Crystal, do you mind going next?
Sure, no problem. Ani Bojo, Crystal Avatoswe in addition to Kaz, and Kamnikaning Danjaba, Mako Dudem, Anishinaabe Kwe Endao. I've just spoken in my traditional Ojibwe language, and I will translate. I said, hello, my name is Chris Labataswe. I'm from Ondagamikani First Nations. That's where my father's from. My mother's from Chippewas and Minjikining First Nations. And for anyone in the Ontario region, that's about a 6 to 7 hour drive from the CN Tower from where my dad is located. And then from my mom's community, it's around 3 hours or so. In Ojibwe and in my clans, we do follow the clan system. So I did say I'm from the Bear Clan, and I'm a proud Indigenous woman. So I am actually the newest in terms of alumni per se. I will be graduating with the class of 2024. And I do live, work, and play in the city of Toronto. We call it the Big Smoke. And what do I do for work? So my 9 to 5 job is I work for TD Bank in human resources. And I do have a lot of, I do a lot of extracurricular as well. So I am the president of the Indigenous Professional Association of Canada and also the president of Misway Beak Aboriginal Employment Training Center of Toronto. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Crystal. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And Matt, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Kim. My name is Matthew Moorish. I recently graduated the Executive MBA program in July of 2022. My current focus is on leading the decarbonization of the energy transition, ultimately to achieve net zero 2050. That goal has come out of the program and was a little bit different than where I started. As going into the program, I was leading, my background is principally in the mining industry and corporate development. And then most recently, I was leading a business turnaround at a small retailer and entered the program with the intent of developing the skills and framework to scale a business from about $10 million upwards of $50 to $60 million in revenue. And through the program and the excellent leadership skills that we learned, and as well as the frontier issues that we need to solve, not only as individuals, but as a nation, that kind of grew and pivoted into a much larger challenge, which is the net zero 2050 obligation that we have to fulfill. So that's my quick little intro.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, well, impressive lineup of panelists today, as you can tell. I'm interested to hear from each of you how you decided it was the right time. Like, what brought you to the Executive MBA in your career, in your personal life? How did you decide it was the right time to pursue the program? Maybe Crystal, you just made the decision, so maybe you can go first.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to. So for me, I think it was just perfect timing. Coming out of the pandemic, I had just finished my master's in human resource management at York University. So I still had that student mentality built into a lot of my routine. And I think for me also, just working in the financial industry for the last decade, I knew that it was a very important step. It's kind of a rite of passage. And I don't mean to say that for every leadership position, you do need an MBA or an MBA, but it is quite common to see our leaders have attained this at some point in their career. So I thought for me, just that transitioning period of still being a student into that routine, and then also knowing in my 5 to 10 year plan that it was on the horizon, it made sense to look into this, and very excited that I was able to be a part of the fall program. And again, it's just from a timing perspective and where I am in my life, it just seemed to be a serendipitous moment.
That's great. And we're thrilled to have you in the program. So I'm glad that the timing worked for you. I'm hoping, actually, before we move on, Crystal, from you, I'm hoping the second part of the question that I'm hoping everyone can speak to, not only why an MBA and why now, but why Ivey? Can you talk a little bit about how you chose to pursue your program with the Ivey Business School?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, I think I seldom go right to the website to read about organizations and our programs. I'm very much a referral person, and that might be my background in talent acquisition is good people know good people, and good programs will speak for themselves with people that have completed it. So I did ask a lot of Ivey alumni to spend some time with me via virtual coffee chats or in-person coffee chats on their experience. And then I also did this with other business schools as well. And so a reoccurring theme that I noticed is that the alumni seem to be very consistent in a support network that I don't think I've ever actually realized. It seemed very much like, every time I made that connection, it was very supported, but also a lending hand of, if you ever have any questions or you want to, talk more about your experiences, I'm always, available to you. So just in that process of trying to understand more about the program, I met actually a lot of friends and network along that journey. So I think for me, that was one of the biggest realization moments or aha moments, is that it is a strong alumni backing. And I think just around the experience of the way that Ivey compares itself to the Harvard, to the Stanford, like the top business schools and, international and globally, I think was also very important to me. And so again, it's a huge investment. So you want, you want the best of the best in terms of a program. And so I think just through a lot of my research and connections and conversations, it seemed to be the right fit for me.
We often joke that there's a real stickiness with Ivey and the alumni network. And what always strikes me and what I hear, and you're saying it yourself, is that there's not only it's a world-class business school, but it's a human business school. There's that human element of reach out, let me know if you have questions. I'm here to help. And so I'm so happy you had that experience in your research and that it brought you to Ivey. James, can I ask you to speak next about how you came to the Executive MBA and why the Ivey Business School?
Sure. Thank you for that, Kim, and great to hear Crystal's perspective. For me, I made the transition because I had just completed, I was in transition. I was I was a CEO for a land claim organization in Nunavut. And that was winding down, and I needed to plan a transition. So I was, and then when I decided to pursue my MBA, and because of my work experience, I wanted to go the EMBA route. And looking at several EMBA programs, I looked at Queen's, I looked at Rotman's, and I chose Ivey because of its reputation and its format. It was the EMBA program was really focused on, applying your experience in the process of learning. And I thought that combination with the case method approach really enticed me to learn. This is the way I wanted to come back, because I've been away from schooling for quite a number of years, and I was I didn't know how to get back into it. So I thought that this process with Ivey was what I wanted to use to get into developing my business skills. Plus, the accelerated option of MBA in 15 months really added value for me, and that's how I got into the program.
Thanks, Kim. I think I would echo the sentiments that James and Crystal have both presented. When I was looking at the program, I started in January of 2021, which was a bit of a unique time, given that COVID had delayed the September module start date into January. I, at that point in time, was going through a lot of issues, leading the turnaround with supply chain leadership, and developing the frameworks that I needed to grow a business, as I said, from about $10 million, and the goal is obviously $60 million or more. And Ivey provided not only a unique environment where you're meeting once a month in the executive program, so you can still balance your work life, but in addition, the case-based methodology. So I looked at Rotman, I looked at Queen's, I was evaluating some options in the States, but the big thing is that the case-based methodology allows you to not be inundated with stacks of textbooks that you need to pull and comb data out of, but really take specific learning objectives, apply them to industries that you may or may not know. And by the end of each case, you know a little bit or can speak confidently about the industries that the cases are based in. Over the course of the accelerated MBA 18 months, I guesstimate that we did about 200 cases, maybe 150 to 200, somewhere in there. It feels like a lot more, though, I can tell you that. But you learn a lot and you're able to speak about these industries. And I think that's really, really valuable. And when we go through the materials, you'll notice that you're not just reading Ivey published cases, you're also reading Harvard Business Schools. You're reading cases and information coming out of MIT Sloan. So you are on the frontier of the best educational institutions right here in Canada. And I think that was very, very relevant. And then pivoting to your second question, which is the other big thing I really liked about it was, as Crystal pointed out, the network. I have friends who have completed the program before me, and I leaned into them for some guidance, and they recommended the big compare and contrast was, if you want to go to Rotman, you would become something like a financial analyst or really numbers focused, whereas Ivey is really dedicated to developing the leadership skills to allow you to guide companies and corporations or nonprofits to handle the tasks and the challenges that we face today. Lastly, I really, really enjoyed the element of international travel. We were only able to go on our second trip. The first trip was unfortunately canceled because of COVID. However, speaking with colleagues of mine who had completed the program, the idea that your first trip is really focused and catered to that material that you're developing in second term, which is strategy, operational efficiencies, and financial management. And then your third term trip is really dedicated to applying everything that you learn at Ivey in a global context. So the program stacks with your base case knowledge. So you bring everybody up to the same level. You work to enhance those into the second term. And then in the third term, you all of a sudden lift off and no longer look at it from a Canadian perspective looking outwards, but you have this opportunity to go abroad and really insert yourself into these other economies and spend enough time there that you can become inserted into their mindset and their culture and use that to look outwards. And those things were very, very valuable to me and some of the guiding decision makers for me.
Thank you. And Crystal, I bet that's getting you a little excited for your term 3 trip. I believe you're scheduled to go to Brazil in your term 3, which will be very exciting. And typically folks who join in February travel to Vietnam. So we always focus on an emerging economy. And as Matt said, it's often a highlight of the experience. So I'm curious, you each bring such impressive professional experiences to the table. You have very rich, busy lives. James, you were talking about your big family before we started the webinar. This is not a light time commitment. The program meets monthly in person, either in London or downtown Toronto. And then outside of the weeks that you're in person, typically you're together or you're working on the program about 25 hours a week. So how, James, from your perspective and in your experience, how did you make it work? And flying into Ontario as well, how did you make it work?
Good question. Yes, this had to be not only my decision, but it had to be a family decision for me. Like my children had to understand what I was getting into, that I was going back to school, and my little ones had to understand that I'm going to be busy, I'm not going to be home, and I'm not going to be available. So, we got into that discussion. My kids had to be part of the process a little bit when I was making my, decision. I had to speak to my older children. I have 6. So my older children had to step up, the older ones who, and then we had to have an understanding between family members that are in our household that, these are the times that I'm going to be available, and these are the times I won't be available. And he understand it so much, but the older kids really found it. I found it helpful just to kind of have this, a set time. For us, it was usually Friday evenings and Saturday mornings that were dedicated for family. So I like to make breakfast in the morning. So Saturday mornings was, dad's breakfast morning. And this is when I would make a big breakfast for everybody. We just have a chance to connect. So it was, it was that kind of, obviously my wife had to be in the decision center, between us. So it was that kind of commitment and decision, not easy because it meant not only time, but also finance wise, but also time wise. Like you said, I had to travel from Iqaluit to Ottawa and then take the train from Ottawa to Toronto in time for the Thursday evening, hoorah of class time and for the whole weekend. And the same with residency weeks. So, going to London. So it took time and pretty complicated for me time-wise just to make it work. So that'd be my little perspective for you. Thank you.
Commuting from out of province. Any tips for people who are considering the program? I know we're going to talk about advice later on, but I'm thinking in the context of having to travel to Ontario. Do you have like something that pops to mind? Like, I wish I had started doing this earlier, or something about that can help folks who are joining from out of province. Anything to share?
Yeah, a couple. I'd say a couple. One is travel points. I hope you have travel points. So when you're traveling, you can use them and benefit from that. But also, I think it's good to know that this school offers a bursary for those that are traveling outside of Ontario. So which was a big help for me. Oh my gosh, that every little bit really was. Really pulled me through some of the tight moments at home and in my travels and in my budget. So thank you for that.
That is certainly available to help offset the cost of coming to Toronto and to London for the residence weeks. I think the diversity of industries, of geographic locations, of experiences in the program is what makes it such an exciting and rich learning environment. And we would never want your physical location to deter you from considering the program, because you're not in the GTA that you don't consider the Ivey Executive MBA. So I'm glad that the travel and accommodation bursary proved to be helpful to you, and that maybe it was a bit of an extra nudge to join the program. Because I've spoken to a couple of your classmates, and one who we chatted with earlier, who really said, James, like, your perspectives and contributions to the class were so impactful, and so that's really special. Matt, having just finished the program, are you already looking back thinking, how did I do it? Now that you've just finished in June, or how did you do it? Maybe walk us through.
It's, again, as I said, we started during COVID, so it was a unique time. For us, the first term was all online first. So if I were to looking back and having the hindsight I have now, I would say there are two things. One, at our convocation coming up, we will probably all be issuing certificates of appreciation to our partners and family, because the program is very, very demanding. And as James outlined, you have to be very, very transparent and get that buy-in from your friends and your family, and most importantly, your employer, to be able to balance that travel schedule. Looking back on the program, I would say that the 25 hours is a good average, but in your first term, you will sometimes spend upwards of 30 hours a week on the materials, reading the cases, meeting with your group. And so being very open about that with everyone that is directly involved in your life is super important. And I would also say for those that are considering the program, definitely once you do start is lean into your teams. You're going to be working with these individuals a lot. And for me is that I had the support of my family, I had the support of my friends, I had the support of my employer. I also had the support of everyone in the program. And I think that is something that is that you don't realize at the beginning, is that everyone will be going through challenges that are ups and downs. And we had individuals who lost family members, and COVID had a huge impact on a lot of people. And often we think that we're very isolated and alone, but you'll be very surprised to learn that everybody will be going through the same challenges at one point or another. And the Ivey class, you don't leave the program with just a bunch of colleagues. You leave with an entire new family. And so the ability to lean into everyone in the program is really, really important to achieving not only your best results and the most amount of learning, but being able to get through it with your head above water, because at some point, everybody's going to feel like they're drowning, and that community and family that you build within your class is of paramount importance to get through it.
How you've made it work so far. You're in the early phases. Hopefully what Matt said didn't make you feel more nervous about what's to come. But I have heard the term one being described as kind of drinking from the fire hose, because it's so overwhelming, right? Like there's just so much. It's new, it's exciting, but exhausting. What are your initial takes? And also, how are you managing the time so far? What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, so I'm still in shock, to be completely honest. And that quote absolutely resonates with me. I think, over the last couple days and weeks, I've made decisions to so I do a lot of board work and extracurricular in terms of volunteering. I've stepped down from 2 boards, and it was the right move for me because, again, I have to prioritize school. And so, again, it was bittersweet in the sense of, I'm obviously very attached to where I volunteer, but I know it's, again, from a timing perspective, it needs to work. And so that's how I've rejigged my schedule a little bit. I've also traded in my Netflix and big screen time to my small monitor. So instead of that couple of hours watching a show or a movie, it's now reading the cases. And I think a way that and again, it's just been a short period of time, but a way that I've, made it very positive is that, some of so far the cases have been very interesting to me, and I don't know if that makes me a nerd or not, but at the end of the case, I spend a couple of minutes debriefing with my partner and going, hey, did you know this about beef jerky, for instance, and, what the distribution is and where does, how does that marketing scheme look like? And so again, he finds it very interesting because I find it very interesting. And so I think that's a way to, it's all about the way you perceive it and also how you take in that information. So if you're optimistic, passionate, and you I don't want to say you make yourself like it, but again, I think that goes a long way in terms of the energy that it takes, and also that perseverance to keep moving forward in terms of reading the next case or, spending that time with your notes. So that's a bit of the tricks of trades in the last couple of weeks that I've learned to make it go by a lot faster for me.
I was mouthing, and trust the process is they tell you at Ivey, trust the process, lean in, and it is, to Crystal's point, it is not going to be easy all the time, but you're there. And not only are you there, you are incredibly lucky to be part of that growth process, Crystal. So as you go through it, it's like a roller coaster. I'm happy I'm done, but at the same time, I'm so excited for you because what you have to come, it like brings tears to your eyes. James, probably the same for you, because you can remember those first days when you started and you're like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't feel like I belong here. And everybody feels the exact same way. And then all of a sudden there's just this dynamic moment. And I'm so excited for everyone on the call that's that's considering joining is definitely do it. And Crystal, for everything that you have ahead, just lean in, trust the process.
I think you have a potential side hustle as a motivational speaker, Matt, but it's true. They say if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. And I love, Crystal, I love that you are, really, you're choosing you're choosing positivity, right? You can choose, you can say, this is really hard and I'm struggling, or this is really hard and so interesting and so engaging. And I think Matt, to your point about like being lucky to be able to do it, I always think when there's like really hard things, I don't know if it's like a personal thing, I guess, but it's like, I don't have to do this, I get to do this. And so it really, I think of like education. I've always worked in higher ed. I know I'm not on the panel, but I'm just going to say this. I've always worked in education. And I think of how so many people fight for access to education around the world. And then to have to be able to surround yourself with strong leaders and passionate, ambitious people, and to have the experience. I hope that Matt's experience, and James, I saw you nodding. I'll be so curious in 14 months to touch base, Crystal, to say, like, did it all live up to the expectations? And what do you think about Matt's words? So thanks for that. Next, I want to ask, thinking about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and the 94 calls to action, specifically call to action number 92, which addresses business and reconciliation. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what role you believe Ivey, and more specifically the Executive MBA, can play in supporting the corporate sector of Canada to achieve the objective. And I'll maybe open the floor, and whoever would like to speak first. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts in response to that.
I mean, when I first read the question, sorry, I put up my hand first, James. I saw you unmuted yourself, but I'll be quick. For me, and I have an HR lens to this question, is that there is a disparity with senior executive positions and representation versus middle management and then the entry level knowledge workers. So for me, I think having representation in classes and cohorts is going to amplify and bring people into leadership positions, which is so, I think, crucial and critical to what reconciliation is all about. We need to be represented not just in organizations at certain levels, but all levels. And so to me, that means C-suite leadership levels. And so I think EMBA can bring, more representation into the classroom. And then to that end, we'll see progression of talent into these other corporate domains and within their own organizations. So it's a very quick synopsis of that call to action, but one that I'm very interested in, and I think can really alleviate some of, it's experiential learning, but it's also all the credentials that you hold and possess on your resume or your lived experiences. And so attaining this is going to help shorten that gap. So again, that's how I interpret it.
I can go. So here's my perspective on that. It's a big question, no doubt. And, we can go in any angle on this. But what I want to offer is what Ivey has to offer that is relevant. In my experience, as I gone through the Ivey program, there's a couple courses that really, really helped me just grow as an individual. But what I thought was helpful in terms of content was, several courses walked us through, how do we develop corporate values? I think that process really offers, ways to evaluate ourselves, or as a leader, you're going out, if partnering for growth is something that you want to leverage to help you access new markets, emerging markets, then you have got to have strategies. And for me, some of these strategies that were offered in some courses like global strategy, for example, offered a lot, ways to do strategic alliances that, have to walk you through a process of, okay, here's your strategy, an emerging market. The indigenous economies, communities, I think, are an untapped market in my perspective. So I think some of the skills that you learn are relevant, that you need to reach out and also in the emerging industries or the emerging economies like some of the developing countries that are, the approach that you use to pursue accessing those markets, that process is relevant in terms of approaching Indigenous communities. I'll leave it there. And some of the discussions, some of the class discussions you're going to have are going to be incredible, Crystal. You're going to find that the room is full of not just nervous people, but people that are growing. They're going through a process that you'll learn. Hey, class discussions was incredible. Like in sustainability, for example, we got into the sharing economy. You're talking about values and you're butting heads about ethics and, what about this? What about children, being involved in generating, your big profits, things like that. But also what was relevant for me in terms of going forwards, sorry if we're being so long-winded here, but there's a lot here, is the approach to the want to come up with reconciliation efforts. This has to be part of your your approach. What can Ivey do? I think more can be done to develop some cases to expose EMBA to Indigenous circumstances. One could be access to water, a case that works at how do you harness resources and help build an infrastructure, investments, pulling together venturists, and how do you help people access water? And the other could be supply chain development. And for me, housing projects. One of our government's priorities is addressing housing. We need 3,500 homes to address our current. In our class time, we got into this discussion. I didn't realize that one of my learning cohorts, he was connected to the biggest construction company in Canada. That makes 7,000 homes, in one. Sorry for the language, but they know some things that we need to harness and need to access. And this is the same for accessing Indigenous communities. Like if we're going to address, Article 92 in the reconciliation process, there's some things we need to harness here. And I think not only are these relevant, but here's some new things that I want to offer here. And that is the biggest need in Indigenous community. I'm excited that there is some effort in terms of trying to understand the history of the Indigenous people in Canada. Residential school, that's painful. But you also need to, have some thick skin when you're dealing with Indigenous people. And that is, you got to show that you're interested in a relationship and that this is critical to showcase your interest, coupled with the commitment, which also means presence. You got to be present, not only in your company, but also socially, onto the social issues, but you care about Indigenous communities and that you want to partner, those kinds of things. These are some of the kinds of things that I think are important to addressing 92 and being able to make these connections with what Ivey is doing, what's helpful to things that more that can be done. So I'll just leave it at that. There's a lot more that I could say. We've got some great examples up here. Like we're just finishing off a Nunavut trade show. I want to connect, every one of you to our Nunavut trade show. It's a great opportunity for you to get introduced to, the way businesses work in Nunavut from a safe distance. I think it's good for you to observe first and then map out a strategy on how to connect to opportunities that exist in, looking at the GDP, but also not just, meeting the needs, but also making venturing possible. Long-winded, but that's my perspective. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Ideas and insights, James. I've made a couple notes of things to share immediately, and I'd love to continue the conversation. Matt, I saw you nodding as James touched on developing business cases related to water access and supply chain and development. And I'm curious, maybe that's something that you were thinking along the same lines of, or what are your thoughts on Ivey's next steps?
Again, very complex and multifaceted question. I was immediately shaking my head about access to fresh drinking water because one of my personal goals, or something that I was driven by, is I'm an avid canoeist. I'm an avid paddle. I love to go out and paddle. I do 7-8 day trips solo on my own. And a lot of the time when you're driving into these remote communities up in Quetico or Northern Ontario, you start to see how fortunate we are for the land and the resources that we have. But it is, to me, absolutely inexcusable that we still have people in Canada that don't have access to fresh drinking water. And the complexity around that issue, leaving aside the political, I would say political ineptitude, but the problem is that it's a very complex situation to be able to try and tackle these issues. And when we look at the Truth and Reconciliation process, Article 92, how businesses can really drive that forward is that at Ivey, we are given the skill set, as James touched on, in sustainability, we learn about circular economy, net positive businesses, but we also spend a lot of time talking about ESG. And sustainability and ESG are really these hot topics right now. And Ivey did a great job preparing us with that foundational information that we needed. And in addition, they also hosted a bunch of workshops. And I go back to a workshop that was coordinated between the Executive MBA and the MBA program and the Sustainability Department at Ivey. And they brought in, I'm just trying to get his name, Joseph Bastian, a former graduate. And he talked about what the Reconciliation and Responsible Investment Initiative is doing here in Canada. And some of those highlights were really around building awareness, allyship, and accountability. And to James's point, I was surprised how many people, with there are exercises that you will do through the sustainability course and through the Ivey program that really drive awareness within the classroom. And one of them is something called a blanket exercise. And I'm not going to give that away. Crystal, you will come up to that in term 2. But it was surprising to me how many people didn't understand or had no knowledge of the history of the relationship between Canada as a country and its Indigenous communities. And most importantly, how much of a struggle it has been to develop those private, public, and government relationships or partnerships to drive that change forward. And it was incredible to see how many people were all of a sudden aware to the idea that in Canada, we still have members of our society that don't have access to clean drinking water. And so on this panel, we're all very aware of those issues, but I think one of the things that the Ivey program does is it drives awareness to topics, not only through case studies, but through the class discussions, where people are able to gather and gain information and firsthand insights to allow them to make more informed decisions. Now, I'm just going to show everyone this because it is on my desk. If it's blurry, it actually makes it better because it'll just allude to what is coming. However, James, you touched on the idea of character and values. And I think that, as you will learn when you go through the strategy courses, is that not only is it corporate character, but it's your own character, and how important character plays into leadership to make better judgment decisions. And that is what we need going forward. I mean, the numbers that the Reconciliation and Responsible Initiative are putting out is that Indigenous members in Canada represent 4.6% of the population, and yet there is a mandate that 98% of the TSX listed companies have approved to try and promote 5% employment of Indigenous individuals. And yet, to Crystal's point, these individuals are so isolated in their different areas, like geographically. I mean, if you go down to Bay Street, you're not going to see 5% Indigenous workforce. It's just not there. And so driving initiatives to promote inclusivity and bringing everyone to the table to tackle the complex issues the legacy of complex issues and that need to be addressed is really important. I also really found that leaving the program is that you have a better understanding of what stakeholders, what it means to include all stakeholders. And when you start to see the stakeholder analysis and the different overlaying components of that, it allows you to not only focus on, I would even say that it started as the triple bottom line in the late 90s, which was profit, social, and environment. And now it has grown so much more beyond that, because ESG, which is focusing on these environmental, social, and governance goals, is actually short, because it should be environmental, social, governance, and Indigenous inclusivity to drive business decisions in Canada. And the Ivey program not only allowed me to expand on that knowledge base, but it also made it very, very present for everyone else in the class. And I think that type of education and those discussions are what we need in Canada, because a lot of time they're isolated, and bringing people, all of the stakeholders, to the table to have those conversations in a safe environment like the classroom at Ivey is what we need in Canada as a whole. I don't know that James and Catherine, James, did you find that as well?
Your feedback and thoughts and suggestions and direction forward. Crystal, to your point at the very beginning in response to the question, talking about the need for leadership at all levels, it feels like that to me was my initial thought when sharing the question. And I know, and I'm coming at it from I recruit and work in admissions for the program, and I have seen the trajectory of careers of participants who join the program, and as they continue to accelerate in their careers to the most senior levels of leadership. And so I see the program as being an accelerator, and I see that there is more need for diversity and for Indigenous leaders in senior executive roles. And so I see a good partnership there. And I think that actually was one of the motivations to bring you together and host this event today, is because my hope is that as this event was promoted, and as folks will come to see the attending now or see the recording, will see themselves in the program and the value it can add, not only to the personal careers, but also to the success of organizations across the country and success as a society. So I was so interested in listening. I mentioned I made a few notes. I was really compelled and keen to hear what everyone had to say. But my initial thought was aligned with yours, Crystal, and not having gone through the program and not knowing the exact content of the 220 cases. James, your point about introducing case studies and the safe and direct conversation that can be had in the classroom. I know that happens, and I know that like it's a great space to learn and to grow, and to be uncomfortable and to show compassion and just to really evolve. And so, Matt, you really spoke to that kind of process for yourself as a participant. As we near the kind of end of this of the panel, I'm hoping you can share biggest piece of advice. If you were to share advice for someone who's considering the program, they're thinking, is this right for me? What would your words of advice be to someone thinking of embarking on the Executive MBA journey? James, do you want to go first?
Sure. Great question. My biggest advice would be, as Matthew and as Crystal is learning to trust the process. This is not just, to me, that isn't just metaphorical. It isn't just nice words to say or to comfort somebody. Trusting the process means you're sticking to the program, but you're also taking advantage of the support system that is offered. You have your profs, but you also have staff that is there to support you, to help you process some things that you're struggling with. But at the same time, you're going to be uncomfortable, and learn to be uncomfortable. And I will say this, out of the most respect that I can say it, is learn to handle criticism constructively. And please don't hold back, even if you're uncomfortable. Raise that hand, even if you're uncomfortable. Raise that hand and just say it, even if in your opinion it sound not smart. You know what I mean? So I think it's good for you to just challenge yourself that way, because for me, the proudest accomplishments were, when I emerged by taking the bull by the horns and began raising my hand in class and saying the things that nobody else was saying, because I was different. I had to get over that hump and just say, it doesn't matter. I don't care. I'm just going to say it because my perspective will help somebody. So thank you.
Your early days of the program, but first impressions and advice for someone who is maybe eyeing up the program for a February or September start. What would you say after your first taste of the Executive MBA?
For sure. So I'd say we'll never be ready. So I guess that means we're as ready as we'll ever be. And what I mean when I say that is that, a lot of time goes into planning when is the right time. And I don't know if this is how everyone thinks. This is how my brain works. Of I try to put it into an agenda, my life schedule, and what does that look like? And that question always comes up, like whether it's you're thinking about having family, am I ready to be a parent? Or, you're about to make a commitment in life, am I ready to make that commitment? And same thing goes with school. Am I ready to go to school? Am I ready to do my MBA? And I think, just be courageous and brave and know that, it is the right decision for you. And I think Ivey's in the business to help everyone succeed. It's not in the business of, selecting who gets it and who doesn't. And I think, that I don't know if it comes from a place of insecurity and or our own lived experiences, but I want people to feel like that they can be brave and that they will succeed no matter what it is, because you have your team, you have everybody around you, surrounding you, that wants you to succeed. So I think that's something to be mindful of and think through, but that'd be my advice.
Like, be brave. Like, you've been brave. You said, okay, I'm betting on myself. I can do this. And I think you sharing that will have an impact on someone else who's like, am I ready? I think sometimes we need to hear it from someone else, like, okay, I can. So thank you. And yes, you can. So Matt, last but not least, final words of advice for somebody considering the Executive MBA.
Firstly, I just want to say to Crystal, the fact that you said have the courage to take that first step. You're in term 1, right? The power of that statement, like, I've got goosebumps thinking about you going into term 2, because the program, when you think about it, when you enter, it's not just academic. And for me, the biggest equal value, I would say, is that I learned to have the courage in myself to make the best possible contributions going forward. So when you're going to take that first step, or if you're even considering it, you have to be super transparent with everyone that is in your life that this will impact. But you have to have the courage to take that step. And you're going to be pushed. It's going to be hard. You're probably going to want to cry. You'll also belly laugh. But at the same time, you have to be very, very patient, because amidst all of that chaos will come an immense amount of clarity, and you have to have the courage to lean into that. And it isn't just about, I will say it again, it's not just about the academics. It is about what you will go through as an individual. So if you're seeking both individual or personal growth, coupled with the skill sets necessary to drive the change in the world that we need, then Ivey's the best program. I think that's where I would leave it, and just embrace it, because as James said, you got to trust the process, and it's one hell of a ride. So take every moment for what it is, and remember how lucky you are.
Each of you for sharing that great advice and impactful responses to all of the questions thrown at you today. We're at the end of this webinar, and I am so appreciative of your time, of your insights, and I'm so excited to stay connected and see how you continue on in your careers. And Crystal, for you in the program, this has been a real pleasure for me, and I thank you again, and hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you for joining and for sharing all of your time and insights. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Kim. Bye, everyone.